Hello, I'm Kay Aho, President of the League of Women Voters, Bloomington. Welcome to all of you tonight. We'd like Girl Scout Troop number 13826 will present the flag and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand for the presentation of the colors. Color Guard present the colors. Color Guard post the colors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much to the Girl Scout Troop 13826. Welcome to our 2012 Legislative Candidate Forum, the second half of the forum presenting the Senate candidates. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We encourage the informed and active participation in government, and we influence public policy through education and advocacy. We do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. We'd love to have you join the League of Women Voters. If you would like to sign up, please see any of the League members tonight. Thank you. Our forum chair tonight is Suzanne Kienitz, and Suzanne is from Bloomington. She's a League member, and she's the former president of the League of Women Voters, Bloomington. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And our moderator tonight is from Eastern Carver County, Diana Casper. Please welcome with me Diana Casper.
Thank you. We have the Senate candidates for District 49, followed by the candidates for State Senate District 50. In each set, candidates will begin with opening statements of 2 minutes, and then at the end, we will again have closing statements also of 2 minutes. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. And so we'll begin with Senate District 49 candidates, an opening statement from Keith Downey.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to the League. I know how much work it is to pull something like this off, so really glad to be here and have this discussion tonight. I'm currently the state representative in District 41A, which is the House district immediately north of here. I've been in that position for 4 years, and so I don't know many of you. So I thought maybe I'd give you a quick snapshot of me and then talk a little bit about why I ran. I'm married with 3 kids. I have a sophomore in college, a senior in high school, doing the common application right now, and a 9th grader in Southview Middle School up in Edina. My wife and I are very much committed to our schools and, as you might imagine, very connected into the community, as most families are. And that drove a lot of my thinking and the reason behind running in the first place. I actually was a business person before running for office. I never really was engaged in the political process, but I did management consulting to state and local governments, and I saw 2 really disturbing trends. And the first has to do with the way government operates. What I saw working in the big agencies was that they were fundamentally not equipped to handle the workload and the challenges that the legislature handed to them. And the flip side of that was the legislators didn't really seem to realize how difficult it was to try and implement everything that they asked those agencies to do. They hold their press conferences, pass fancy legislation, advertise what they had done, little of which ever gets accomplished. The other thing I saw from a business perspective was what was happening to the economy in Minnesota. What was once an extremely vibrant, dynamic, early-stage investment economy, very diverse and highly influential financial services community, was really starting to lose its edge. And what I heard continually was that our tax and regulatory burden, the cost of doing business in Minnesota, was becoming prohibitive. So for those 2 reasons I ran. I've been in the legislature for the last 4 years, and we'll speak more on the other issues later.
Thank you. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting another substantive debate on the important issues for this election. I am a pro-business Democrat, running for Senate because our district needs a moderate and independent voice in the legislature. As your senator, I will always put the priorities of the district ahead of ideology and partisanship. My background is in business. I'm an attorney at Target Corporation in government affairs. My husband and I make our home in this district because we have great schools and a great quality of life. In this campaign, I've knocked on more than 5,000 doors, and I hear that you're really frustrated with the partisanship at the Capitol. My opponent has been part of that gridlock as the legislator for 2 terms. His track record includes the longest government shutdown in Minnesota history, a $2.4 billion debt owed to our schools, and my opponent said publicly that he pulled an accounting gimmick to make a state budget look more balanced than it really is. My opponent has proposed a reform roadmap or a 15 by 15 plan. I think these are both catchy slogans, but they sound like more gimmicks to me. So why hasn't he implemented these ideas? Well, let me share you what he's been doing at the Capitol for the last 2 terms. He voted against equal pay protections for women, against reproductive rights, and against stem cell research. He voted to put the marriage amendment on the ballot, and he made the dirty dozen list of legislators with the worst environmental voting record in the entire United States. And by the way, my property taxes on my home have increased 15% since he took office. So Mr. Downey wants you to believe that we have a budget surplus and that he will tell you that the budget outlook is nothing but good news. But let's be honest, we don't have a surplus, and the state forecast shows a deficit that just keeps growing. Well, none of that sounds like reform to me. I care deeply about our community, and I'm running because I want to bring honest leadership and a spirit of collaboration so that we can start to get things done for the district and for the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the District 50 candidates, the opening statement from Vern Wilcox.
Thank you, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event again. I feel actually pretty comfortable. I was in this chair last night, most of the night, so it feels like home to me. I'm a Bloomington guy. I'm raised in Bloomington, graduated from Bloomington schools. I raised my family. I have four children and 4 grandchildren. My children all went to Bloomington schools. I left for about 4 years, went in the service, came back about 1970, and kind of came back with the feeling that I had to put something back into the community. I wanted to leave it a little better than it was. From there, my children were young. I went to Boy Scouts. I went to PTA. Actually, I've worked as a volunteer teacher through United Way for a while. Came in, worked with the HRA, worked with the Planning Commission for a number of years, and it was my honor to be elected to the City Council in 1993. I am now the longest running city councilman in the history of Bloomington. And I can't tell you what an honor it's been and what a thrill it's been to do that. Bloomington, it's interesting. I think of Bloomington, I was honored some years ago as president of the Sister City Group and actually went over to Japan. And I think they either couldn't pronounce my name or couldn't remember it, so they called me Mr. Bloomington. And, frankly, that was quite an honor, When I went on the city council, I really went on with no agenda. I've seen a lot of people come and go on the city council. A lot of them came on with an agenda, found out that they needed the majority of 7 votes to get anything done, got frustrated and left. I went on there with the idea that I just wanted to make it a little better and hopefully listen to my constituents and do what they were looking for. So I think I've had a successful run. I look to take that experience over to the state Senate and serve you over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Halverson Wickland.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say thank you also to the League of Women Voters, Bloomington, for hosting this event. I'm Melissa Halverson Wickland, and I'm running for State Senate in District 50 because I want to work to ensure that Bloomington and Richfield remain strong communities and offer opportunities for their residents for access to good jobs and strong schools. Thanks to Bloomington residents, I've had the incredible opportunity to represent our community on the Bloomington School Board, and also now more recently as school board chair. It's been an incredible experience, and seeing our young people up close, it gives me great hope and assurance that our future is indeed very bright. As a lifelong Bloomington resident, I've been a beneficiary of the Bloomington Public Schools, and I have a passion for making sure that our next generation has the same great educational opportunities as I had. I believe that I can do that best by working in the Minnesota Senate. I see educating our children as one of the most important core roles of government. And my experience on the school board has shown me that while we can make important decisions locally, the main big decisions regarding educational funding, educational policy, are made at the state legislature. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and my professional experience is working as an engineer, an engineering manager, and engineering director. I have experience leading and working on large teams to solve problems. I'm good at listening to people, and I'm also good at building consensus among group members. I believe in the power of collaboration to come up with the best solutions to the difficult problems that we face. And I commit to you that I would work in a collaborative way with my fellow senators to ensure that we come up with the best solutions for our community and for the state. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions tonight.
Thank you. And as we move into the questions, just again, a reminder to the audience that if you have questions, please direct them either to Senate District 49 or to 50. And we're going to start with the questions for District 49, and there have been a number of questions that are all around the Minnesota tobacco tax, so I'm going to try to combine the three questions. If elected, would you be willing to raise the tobacco tax from $1.23 to the level of $1.52, which is Wisconsin's current tax? It's a well-established fact that states that have raised the tax have on record increasing numbers of people who quit. And we'll start with Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. I definitely think that we need to focus on keeping our youth away from tobacco products, and I believe that we need to start early. And if indeed a tax to increase it to $1.53 would actually make a difference in avoiding having our young kids addicted to tobacco, I would definitely consider it, and I've made that public with Cancer Votes and in my public questionnaire.
Okay, thank you. Keith Downey.
Thanks. I would not support just a straight up increase on the tobacco products unless it were accompanied by offsetting tax cuts in other areas. Frankly, I think doing it as a one-off activity is very problematic at the legislature. There's a number of folks on a bipartisan basis talking about how we restructure our tax code more broadly to emphasize such things as competitiveness and fairness and transparency. And if, as part of that, we decided to increase the tax on tobacco products with offsetting reductions in other areas, I would be glad to consider that.
Okay, thank you. And then a question for the District 50 candidates, and the question is, what is your position on the Mall of America Phase 2, and specifically TIF funding? And Melissa Halverson-Wickland.
Mall of America Phase 2 definitely is a great project. I've seen the development, or seen the information on the development. I think that the mall is an important asset to Bloomington, and certainly an important asset to the whole state of Minnesota. And I guess that would be my approach in looking at future development. Because it is such an asset to the state of Minnesota, we need to look at how do we encourage development, how do we encourage development in Phase 2 in a way that benefits not only the state and our community, and also does not put our property tax residents in Bloomington and Richfield, doesn't put any unfair burden on them. I see this as a state asset. I enjoy going to the mall myself. I can remember in 1992 riding my bike with my daughter in the bike trailer over to the mall, and we enjoyed the opening festivities. So I certainly appreciate that it is a significant part of our community, and I hope that the future development can be just as vibrant and impactful to our community. But I do see that we need to be responsible, and we need to look out for Bloomington and Richfield residents as we're looking at options for helping the development and possible subsidies. Thank you.
Okay. Vern Wilcox.
I think it's interesting. Both my opponent and some people earlier tonight talked about, actually have come out publicly opposed to subsidies at the mall and, for the extension of the mall. You know, I'm proud to tell you, I was chair of the planning commission when we brought the mall to Bloomington. You know, I think that the misnomer out there is that these subsidies are being paid for by Bloomington taxpayers. TIF is basically, it's a tool that we use. The developer has to put in a certain amount of money to qualify to get a percentage, and that's where the TIF comes from. We actually, the mall didn't get any money from the city of Bloomington. They didn't get any money from the bonds. We used that money to build the parking ramps and the infrastructure, and we had that in place prior to the mall opening. That's why the mall has been so successful. There can be no question about what the mall has brought into the city of Bloomington. There's a reason that we have more hotels than the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul combined. There's a reason that we have the highest occupancy rate of anyone in the Twin Cities. There's a reason that we're developing out there, that we've got a Mayo Clinic standing in line to go into phase 2. We've got another 5-star hotel that's going to link up to the phase 2. I just came out of a Port Authority meeting a few minutes ago, in fact, and I'm proud to tell you that McGough, who is out there because of the mall, is now just announcing a plan for a new 303-room hotel, 8-story hotel, that will break ground next spring. That's real jobs. That's real economy. That's what we need. You know, look at it. If we didn't have the mall, you wouldn't have a light rail. You wouldn't have the development in South Loop. You know, I've represented that district for the last 19 years. I'm proud to tell you that 65% of the forecast development in Bloomington is going to happen in my district in South Loop.
Okay, thank you. Question for District 49 candidates. What is your philosophy on taxation? Keith Downey.
Philosophy of taxation. I think maybe most importantly for Minnesotans right now is to think about some really critical issues about the way we tax in Minnesota and what the way forward is. I mentioned before that there's some bipartisan work going on to restructure our tax code for the future. There are a number of principles behind that. The first is we should reduce our actual rates and in the process eliminate exemptions and credits along the way so that we get a fair and more transparent actual tax rate. That's one. Another is we should quit taxing income so highly in Minnesota and switch over and tax consumption as an alternative. Most of the states that are growing faster than Minnesota economically have made distinctive moves in that direction. They are far more competitive than our economy is from a business taxation standpoint, and it's really showing here in Minnesota in terms of our own growth and the own business development that we see here natively in Minnesota. We are ranked, no matter what ranking you look at it in the bottom 5, bottom 8, the worst 5, worst 8 in terms of business taxation in the country compared to other states. Taxes aren't everything. We got a nice quality of life. We've had a quality education system historically. We've had low costs of energy, a number of things that have served us very well, but we cannot ignore the lack of competitiveness from a taxation standpoint. Our cost of doing business in Minnesota is substantially higher than our neighboring states.
Thank you. Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. Well, I think for starters, the property taxes are out of control, and they have been for the last decade because we've punted as a state to local governments to tackle the deficits that we've had at the local level because of the lack of leadership at the state level. So I think that needs to be reeled in, and so property taxes need to be tackled as opposed to income and sales tax, although there will be tax reform proposed in this next legislative session. So I think we have to come in with an open mind, but I think that this is not the time to raise taxes. We're coming out of a great recession, and the best way to raise revenue is by stimulating our economy and growing jobs that will grow a tax base. So taxes should be a measure of last resort, in my opinion. And unlike my opponent who is shackled to blind pledges, we do need to look long-term. What can we do sustainably to fund our government and the services that we rely on responsibly and do it in a smart way?
Okay, thank you. In this question for Senate District 50 candidates, do you support a statewide generic environmental impact statement known as GEIS on silica sand mining and a moratorium while this statement is being created? Vern Wilcox.
Actually, most any development that occurs within the state or even in the city, for example, has to have an environmental impact before they're allowed to proceed. And that's a good thing. I mean, you need to have that. So would I support it? Absolutely. But I think we need to also consider the fact that, we've just virtually layered these people down with regulations, with, the sad part of me, I spent 30 years in the construction industry for U.S. banks. And honestly, towards the end, what I found out was it took longer to get the permits and get permission to build a building than it did to build a building. We need to restructure that. We need to make this process easier, more efficient, and allow these things to go ahead if, in fact, they are environmentally sound. I have no problem with making sure that's reality, but I think we also need to expedite the process.
Okay, thank you. Melissa Halverson-Wickland?
Yes, I think in terms of development such as the sand mining, I think we do need to look very, very carefully at the environmental impact. And so in a statement, I would say I would support the environmental impact statement that would need to be done. I would need to know more about the specific proposal. I think the word that there's a moratorium that would be in place. I guess I would need to know a lot more about what does that mean and how long is that? What's already been done? I think I would use my engineering background to assess, what work has been done. I think that our state does need to do as much as it can to make sure that developers are following the environmental impact statement. And when we're analyzing, is it going to have a negative impact on our state? New things like sand mining, we need to make sure that they don't start to have a negative impact, and then realize that we should have done more work to address the potential concerns ahead of time. So I would support environmental impact statements if it makes sense that a moratorium is put in place from a standpoint that we don't allow negative impact on our environment before it goes along. Then I would say that a moratorium would make sense as well. So I believe that this is going to be a growing concern, and I believe that we need people in the legislature who can analyze the information and the data available to us about what's happened in other places. This has been going on in other places in Minnesota, so we need to assess what's gone on there and how can we learn? How can we learn from their experiences to make sure that we don't have a negative experience here? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And now for District 49 candidates, the question is, what government services, if any, should be privatized? Melissa Franzen?
Thank you. Well, I think we have to make sure that every government service that we offer, that we're accountable for every tax dollar. So I think that's the premise that I would start off from, analyzing what services are efficient and effective. And I think we all should have that type of evaluation on a recurrent basis. So at the outset, I would have to dig a little deeper and see what needs to be done more efficiently, and if indeed there is a private sector that can do some of this work more effectively. So I think you have to look at it case by case. Certainly, education is something that I believe that the government's role is to provide a sound public education, and that's on our Constitution. So certain services will never be able to provide in a privatized manner. But others, I definitely would be open to seeing what can be done efficiently. But I think you need to do the evaluation on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, Keith Downey.
Yeah, thank you. If I could, just to start out, I want to correct my opponent. I have never signed a tax pledge. I don't do candidate surveys. My intention is to go to the legislature and represent my district and the best interests of this state. So just to be clear, the litany of attacks that she launched at the beginning aren't true. Her statement about my signing a tax pledge isn't true, and we need to be careful with our comments here tonight. With regard to privatizing, that's actually one of the things I've specialized in the legislature. My background in management consulting allowed me a lot of exposure to those kinds of things, and I'll give you a couple of examples. I worked with Representative Phyllis Kahn, of all people, Democrat from Minneapolis, who had a long interest in consolidating the technology components of state government. We had 72 agencies and attached boards that all had their information technology operations, 37 chief information officers, 34 data centers, and we are now in the process of consolidating that after bipartisanly working a bill through the legislature that Governor Dayton signed, and I appreciate his leadership in implementing that. We have a similar opportunity to do the same thing for our back office functions when you think about accounting and that every agency is doing human resources and payroll and accounting and finance and purchasing, having their own contracts. There are huge opportunities for us to get more efficient there. Another huge barrier and something that I've proposed legislation to change is something in state law that you'll hear called 16C. 16C is a piece of state law that says if there is a state employee willing and able to perform a function, you cannot outsource it. So right now, we are precluded at the state from even considering outsourcing or privatizing whole swaths of things that might make better sense out in the private sector. So we've got other areas. We're underwriting all of our health care. We have pilots going where people can actually procure health care out in the private market. It's saving a lot of money. I've seen projections. It could be 2 or 3 billions in savings. So there's a raft of opportunities, and we've barely
Time.
started.
Thank you. And now for District 50. The question is, what do you think the role of government is on the state level? Melissa Halverson-Wickland.
Well, on the state level, I think one of the key roles of government, as I've already mentioned, is providing a sound educational system. I think that is necessary because we want to make sure that not only our current students and future generations will be able to come out of school and contribute to our society. So I see that as one of the most significant functions that government needs to provide. Certainly there are other roles in terms of providing health and human services to people. We have many people in our society who need an additional help from our government, and in terms of those who are living with little means, and we need to make sure that the vulnerable in our society that they have those means to survive. I think that's an important role for government. Certainly public safety. There's another very important role. We need to make sure that our society is kept safe and secure, and that's a necessary function. So could we be doing better in these areas? And the legislature, do we have a very important role in making sure that all of these are working properly? Yes, I do believe that we are in that responsibility, or have that responsibility as senators. So I would be wanting to bring my expertise from being on the school board in terms of education. I understand how the funding system works, and I believe that the state funds takes up about 40% of our state budget to fund education. So I believe that my experience and my background will be very critical to understand this system. So that would be one area that I would like to work on. Thank you.
Thank you. Vern Wilcox.
Thank you. Well, we have a saying in Bloomington, basically the taxpayers, their concern is, first of all, when it snows, they want to see somebody come and plow their street. When they turn on the faucet, they want to see the water come out. When they flush the toilet, they want to see it go down. Anything other than that is non-essential expense. I think honestly, I would like to see the state get out of some of this business. I think we've proven time and time again that the city is much more efficient at operating most of these things than the state is. I think that's one of the biggest problems with our education system, is that they're continually sending out mandates and not funding them. That's why our schools are so burdened with debt. What I'd like to do is actually get some of those things, some of those tasks out of the state, send them back to the city where they're more efficient at running them. I'm very proud of the fact that in 19 years we've taken Bloomington to be one of 32 cities in the entire United States that's rated with a 5-star rating in the 3 major bonding agencies. That's a huge, huge asset. I mean, the cost of our money when we have to go out and bond for roads and things like that is much less expensive than most of the other cities. I think that's what needs to happen at the state. I think, they haven't had a balanced budget in how many years over there, and they played games jumping money back and forth trying to make it look balanced, but we all know it's not. I would like to take that experience over to the state, balance the budget, and run them near as efficiently as we have at the city.
Thank you. And this question for District 49 candidates. With more and more growth in Bloomington, we have a huge influx of new immigrants in our neighborhood. What is your plan for processing them to a path towards citizenship? Keith Downey.
Well, immigration policy is largely defined at the federal level, and so we don't have the role that you might expect in terms of processing immigration requests. I can make a generalized statement about maybe some principles for immigration reform that I would support, but these are really largely federal issues. I've always wondered why in the world we have the ceiling on immigration that we do. I think everyone in this room represents some extension of an immigrant family, and every one of us is proud of the new history that we're creating as descendants of immigrants. And so why in the world we only allow 650,000 people into this country legally every year, I don't know. I think we should open that spigot, and then the demand for illegal immigration would go down substantially. But that's a federal matter, not a state matter. At the state level, though, we do have this complex intersection of how we enforce immigration law at the state level and under the guidance of the federal statutes and the federal mandates for it. I know we've dabbled with requiring employers to turn in illegal immigrants. I know we've talked about at the state using verification processes before we hire people to make sure that they are not illegal immigrants. I think those are all reasonable mechanisms that we could pursue here at the state to support our federal immigration law.
Thank you. Melissa Franzen?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. With more and more growth in Bloomington, we have a huge influx of new immigrants in our neighborhood. What is your plan for processing them to a path towards citizenship?
Okay. Thank you. Well, I'll start with quickly saying that I do have my comments are backed by citations, unlike the negative attacks and campaigning that has been going on against me. So I'll move on to the answer of the question. I do obviously believe it's a matter of federal law. Immigration law is mostly federal, and it's in coordination with local and state government. But it is a matter of having comprehensive immigration reform at the federal level, and I think the state can do more in pushing for that because we've seen a patchwork of laws across the country, and it's just more divisiveness versus taking into account the vibrancy of a lot of the immigrant populations that are joining our states. I think they are an engine of economic growth, but there has to be a path to citizenship. For instance, we bring a lot of immigrants to our universities, and they get trained on and science and technology and areas that we have a gap in the skills workforce, but then they can't stay here. So we definitely have a disconnect because we can provide more options for those type of immigrants in this community to continue to be here. But again, that would be federal. And I know that chambers of commerce are very supportive of increasing the STEM visas at the federal level. So I think the state can continue to push for that and making sure that we keep the best and the brightest here and that there is a path for citizenship once they're here.
Okay, thank you. And this question for District 50 candidates. What will you do as a state senator to avoid partisan gridlock? Vern Wilcox?
I think I have a great reputation for that. The 19 years I've been here, I mean, the building you're sitting in, I headed up the task force that brought in the theater group and the fine arts group next door. I've served on any number of task force in Bloomington, and there's quite a few buildings with my name on, things with that to my credit. And I think, I've done that by working across party lines, across, trying to get, common sense solutions. I'm often told by people that, I'm the voice of common sense on the city council. And I take a great deal of pride in that, You heard a bridge mentioned earlier here tonight. That debate was in stalemate for the last 5 years. They've been trying to decide what to do about that bridge. I was appointed by my city council to go down and sit on that bridge committee and come up with a common sense solution. I'm proud to say that we've moved that farther down the agenda in the last 3 months than it has in the last 5 years. And we're not looking to build a $12 million bridge. We're looking to find a common sense solution to get some sort of a bridge across to connect the trails in the River Valley. So really, it's just about working with people. I think I have two qualities that really set me aside from most of my opponents. I'm very patient, and I'm also known as a great listener. And I think those are the two qualities you have to survive 19 years on the city council.
Melissa Halverson Wickland.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the key to avoiding partisan gridlock in the upcoming session in the legislature is to have people elected like myself who have already demonstrated that they can work together with groups in the business setting and in a public service setting. I have done both. I have been on the school board, and we work together in a nonpartisan way to come up with the best solutions to help our students achieve more. Because raising student achievement is definitely our goal, along with all of the rest of the staff and parents and everybody in our school district. So I think that that one thing I would bring is experience in working in a nonpartisan way in a government body and having results. When I was working to lobby to become chair this year, part of the reason I believe that I was selected as chair by my fellow board members was because they knew that I would work together with all of them to help us do a better job as a school board together, because that's what we need to do. We need to work together. Secondly, in my business experience, I have worked on teams to manage projects, to make projects move forward. And you have to bring everybody's ideas in, and you have to be willing to listen, and you have to be willing to compromise, because we can't all have our way. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last couple of years is that there are some people in the legislature who aren't willing to compromise, and they haven't been willing to accept other ideas. I would go forward into it with an open mind. I would be willing to analyze the situations that come forward to me. I would be willing to address the options available, and then I would work to collaborate with my fellow legislators to come up with the best solution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move to closing statements, and we'll start with Melissa Franzen.
Thank you. As your senator, I will be realistic with our challenges and focus on achievable goals rather than sound bites and reform slogans. It's time to end the attack on education. The state has to be a better partner to schools, to teachers, and to parents. We need to increase graduation rates, reduce the achievement gap, and strengthen science and technology education. While my opponent continues to blame teachers and the union that represents them, I plan to roll up my sleeves and get to work with all stakeholders to achieve this important goal. The impact of education cuts and borrowing at the state level is real here in our district. My opponent cut $26 million from Edina schools and $35 million from Bloomington schools. My opponent wants you to believe that we have a surplus when we in fact have a projected deficit. This is simple arithmetic. It's like using a credit card to pay your bills and then saying that you have a surplus. We also need to restore a AAA credit rating that we lost as a result of our government shutdown. Unlike my opponent, whose reform plan is to cut government to the bones by eliminating things like unemployment insurance, a safety net that literally put food on the table for families during this recession. Instead, I will focus on strong infrastructure, on long-term investments so that businesses will continue to call Minnesota home. I will push to implement e-fairness legislation. I will vote to build Southwest Light Rail Corridor, and I will support the construction of a Mall of America Phase 2 development. I was recently outdoor knocking, and I met a 91-year-old couple that has lived in the district for 62 years. I also met a couple that was just moving into their new home. As your senator, I will fight for you whether you have lived here for decades or if the district is your new home. You have a choice to make this election, and my opponent is an extreme conservative that's in line with the Tea Party. I'm a pro-business moderate, and I will find the sensible solutions we need to move this district and Minnesota to a brighter future. I ask for your vote on November 6th so we can get to work. Thank you.
Keith Downey.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope I've tried to at least present some of the solutions that we're actually already in process working on down at the Capitol. I want us to take a quick look at the context of what we face overall in this country and as a state. Our federal government is $16 trillion in debt. If you add up the unfunded liabilities, another $60 to $80 trillion, we are close to $100 trillion of government spending that we have absolutely no way to pay for. That's the big picture. We in state government for 25 years grew state spending twice the rate of the growth of our economy. These are literally unsustainable statistics. And we won't get out of this situation with cheap political labels, false attacks, and limited capacity to look at the complexity of the challenges we have and address them. I've proposed a roadmap. All bills that have been proposed in the legislature, all bills that have been scored by legislative offices or proposed by various consultants on existing models in other states, these are legitimate savings of $1.5 billion, and you can pick up the roadmap. We take that plus the additional $2 billion in tax revenue that's coming to the state next year, and you know what? We can tackle our budget problem without raising taxes, and we can provide a higher level of service to citizens and do a better job in state government and perpetuate the Minnesota legacy. But it won't be by pouring money into the same old structures and the same old programs. That will not work. And so I have always been an idea person. I have always worked bipartisanly. I have actually passed bills with Democrats that Governor Mark Dayton has signed, which most people in this room have not. And so to hide behind cheap labels and attack ads and say that somehow we need to have a change, you know what? We've got somebody in the legislature that's fighting for you with real solutions to complex problems. And I'd love to continue to do that for you.
Thank you. And now closing statements for the Senate 50 candidates. And we'll begin with Melissa Halverson Wickland.
Thank you. And I'd like to say thank you again to the League of Women Voters for offering this opportunity to the candidates. I'm Melissa Halverson Wickland, and I would be honored to represent Bloomington and Richfield in the state Senate. People who know me know that I am a hard worker, and I would work hard every day for residents of Bloomington and Richfield at the Capitol. One of my priorities is education. I believe in the power our public schools offer and can have in creating opportunities for all Minnesota children. We must be addressing the achievement gap. Beginning with early childhood education, which Bloomington and Richfield schools are partnering in, and we deliver programming that is nation or statewide and nationwide examples of high quality early childhood programming. And this needs to continue through post-secondary education options. Our quality of life in Minnesota and Bloomington depends on adequately funding our educational system. As school board chair, I have prioritized early childhood education as an area that we should expand programming, and we will be adding classrooms in one of our buildings this school year. I think given that 40% of our state budget goes towards education, I believe my expertise in this area will allow me to represent our communities well and will allow me to fight for our fair share of school funding. It's easy to say reduce mandates and give back local control. But really, in reality, what are we willing to change, or what programming are we willing to give up? It really comes down to adequate funding. Another priority for me would be to take my analytical skills, my ability to listen and work together with others in a bipartisan way to serve the people of Bloomington and Richfield. I believe that I will do that. I have not stated that I am opposed to subsidies completely, and I'm willing to listen to all options. That's what I have. I have an open mind, and I'm willing to listen to the options. And I hope that I can earn your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Please join me in thanking the candidates.
You're going to give me a
Vern
chance?
Wilcox. I do this, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You know, you've heard so much from all the candidates about the economic woes of the state, and they're all true. I mean, everybody's looking for money, you know. I'm a Bloomington guy. You know, I firmly believe that most of my time on the council has been spent fighting to keep the money from Bloomington in Bloomington. We have a little thing called fiscal disparities. My opponent is in favor of fiscal disparities. I'm opposed to it. We had this come up at a candidate forum in Richfield. 72% of this district is in Bloomington, 28% is in Richfield. Do the math. Richfield's a receiver of fiscal disparities. Bloomington taxpayers shelled out over $18 million last year in fiscal disparities. You know, my goal is to keep the money in Bloomington, or at least bring it back to Bloomington. I think we need to reform that kind of silliness. You know, I made a deal years ago in 1967. I was sitting down in the jungle in Southeast Asia. I made a deal with God. get me out of this mess, and when I get back, I'm going to try and be a better individual, and I'm going to try and serve my community. I think I've lived up to that pledge. You know, I'm honored to tell you I sit on the VFW Honor Guard. I help do funerals for my veterans, my fellow veterans. And I do that not just because my initials are over the front door. That's a sideline. I've served any number of things in this community. You know, I've sat on the Hiawatha Corridor Commission. I've sat on just countless commissions in the city. And I did this, I went on this council, as I said, with no agenda. I go to the state capitol with no agenda. I go there to represent your agenda. As I mentioned before, I think I'm a tremendous listener. I think I'm very patient. And I think I'm very effective at working across party lines to represent you and get your agenda done. I look forward to going for you. Thank you to the League.
Thank you. And now, please join me in thanking the candidates. Again, I would like to remind you that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the sponsor of any candidate. But the most important thing is to remember to vote Election Day, November 6th. Thank you.